You're talking with your neighbor and you start walking around the block and you're grumbling with your neighbor. You're commiserating about this story. And you're saying, I can't believe this is happening. Can you believe how people are doing this? Can you believe this thing has happened? And as you're strolling along, a third person, what are you guys talking about? And the two of you are like, well, what do you mean? Haven't you heard the news? Haven't you heard the news? What are you living under a rock? This big story happened. It's in the news. It's everywhere. It's on Facebook. It's on YouTube. It's on the news. It's on SBS. It's everywhere. And you explain this terrible news story. So the question then becomes well, what if that third person was the Lord himself? What if that's who that third person is? You're going along and you're complaining. You're saying, can you believe all this stuff happens? And it's the Lord who says, what are you guys talking about? What are you doing? I've been pondering this because, we had the Easter story, and this is kind of a parallel to the story where the disciples are on the road to Emmaus, right? They're walking along and they're grumbling. Jesus has died, and they're not happy. And along comes Jesus, who says, what are you guys talking about? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Don't you know? Don't you know this guy? He was the prophet. He was the one who was going to save us all. He was going to make everything right. Where have you been? He was a great in deed and act. What does the Lord say to them? Do you remember? We're going to read the story because I think the idea is, if we can take a look at how this story plays out for them, we can kind of import it into our lives and say, well, yeah, are we right to go around complaining about the way of the world today? Because I know sometimes the ways of the world upset us, and I think I'm a pretty optimistic guy, but every now and again there's a story that comes along and just kind of gets me, and I start getting upset and annoyed and feeling like, well, maybe I shouldn't be so optimistic. Maybe the world is terrible, maybe I'm wrong. And then I eventually calm back down. But, this is kind of the cycle. So let's take a look at the story of the road to Emmaus and see if we can get some lessons about how the Lord would respond to us when we see these news stories that we find upsetting. So this is here from Luke chapter 24. It says, now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. And as they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, what are you discussing together as you walk along? They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked them, are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened these days? Are you the only person who hasn't opened the news? Right? Aren't you the only person who hasn't turned on Facebook? Have you not looked at social media? Come on, buddy, wake up. What things? He asked. About Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. We had hoped that he was going to be the one who was going to redeem Israel. So let's pause there for a moment. Because, these disciples, right, they had it all worked out, right? This was going to be the guy who was going to come here. He was going to dismiss those Romans from power, and everything was going to be great. We know this. We know the story. And from their perspective, they had all the evidence, right? All these deeds he could do. He could heal the sick. He fed the hungry. The blind could see. Demons were cast out. And oh boy, he was smart too. Those Pharisees, they tried to trick him, but he always had a good answer. Right? They had nothing on this guy. So this was our guy. This was the new Moses. If you look at what Moses did with his miracles and plagues and all, they had a reasonable point of comparison, right? But now he's dead. Now he's dead. And it's been 3 days. So yeah, we're kind of we're bummed out, right? Yeah, we're grumbling on this road. No, we're not happy about this. We were optimistic, but not anymore. So I go back to the story. It says, what's more, it's the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but did not find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women said, but they did not see Jesus. He said to them, how foolish you are! How slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and enter into his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in the scriptures concerning himself. You can kind of imagine this interaction, right? They're walking along and they're grumbling, and this third person comes up and says, what's going on? And what do these two disciples want, right? They want someone to commiserate with, right? They want someone just to kind of carry on with their sad story. Come on, join in with us on our little pity party. We're thinking about how bad things are and how bad the world is. And come on, let me tell you, this guy was amazing. They've killed him, and we're just going to grumble and complain about it. And what they expect Jesus to say, right, after they've told them their little story, they expect Jesus to say, oh boy, you guys are right. That is terrible. Oh, I can't believe that happened. Oh, wow. But what does he actually say? He says, how foolish you guys are. You're a bunch of idiots. That's basically what he says. You're idiots. Come on, what's wrong with you guys? Are you so stupid as to not know what's going on? Don't you know the kind of place you are? Can't you guys read the signs of the times? And so right in the middle of all their self-pity, just bam! What? We're stupid? We're idiots? We're slow? What are you doing? That's pretty confronting the way he's dealing with this situation. Can you imagine, someone comes up to you and they're in the middle of a pity party and you bam, you're an idiot. I don't know. My line of work, people generally don't like that. If they come to my office and say, I'm feeling bad about life, and I call them stupid, I don't expect I'll have a job a whole lot longer, right? It's just it's not how people expect things to go. So this is what happens though, right? This is what Jesus does. So do we need some of that kind of smack in the face sometimes when we're complaining about the world? How foolish we're being, how slow we are. Have you read the Word? Because that's really what Jesus is saying here. Don't you know the signs of the times? Don't you know, you've read the scriptures, right? You know this had to happen. And so there's kind of some of that for us because, we understand history. When we look at, say, Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday is a great example of this, where we go, these poor guys, Jesus was coming in there. We go, oh yeah, he had to be crucified and died and all this kind of stuff. We know that, and we can look back with hindsight and say, yeah, okay, these guys weren't very bright. They didn't get that Jesus came to be king, to be crucified. How come these guys didn't see it, right? He was trying to do something greater than just being the king over the Romans, right? So the first coming didn't go as they expected. We go, yeah, all right. So we can kind of chide them and go, oh, they're so slow, ha ha ha. Maybe the lesson for us in this is that maybe the second coming isn't going to go quite as we expected either. Maybe the second coming isn't going to result in little congregations filled up with churches all around the world with the writings at the front, Maybe there's something that we need to be aware of. Maybe we need to be a little better at reading the signs of the times. Maybe we need to believe what the prophets have spoken. So then, what have the prophets spoken regarding the second coming of the Lord? Well, I'm glad you asked, because if we look at the readings, we have something from 2 Samuel and something from Isaiah, and they both reference the second coming. At least that's what Swedenborg says, right? So the one in 2 Samuel, it's the last words of King David, right? The best king, you know, that's what we used to say in the kids' talks, right? He's the best. Why is he the best? Because he does what the Lord says most of the time, more than anybody else. So this is what King David says. These are his dying words. The Spirit of the Lord spoke by me, and his word was on my tongue. The God of Israel said, the Rock of Israel spoke to me. He who rules over men must be just, ruling in fear of God. And he shall be like the light of the morning when the sun rises, a morning without clouds, like tender grass springing out of the earth, by clear shining after rain. So that's who rules over the men. So that's who rule over men should be like. Although my house is not so with God, that's what it should be. My house is in that way, yet he has made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things and secure. For this is all my salvation and all my desire. Will he not make it increase? So the idea here is it gives us this picture that the person who rules over people will be like the sun shining after rain, a morning without clouds. Not quite there yet. Tender grass springing out, and that's what this future is going to look like. And so David is saying that, well, even though I'm not like this, even though we're not there yet, he's promised that he's going to make it increase. He's going to do this through us, and he's going to make it increase. And so keep that image of the sun shining and the rain and the grass springing up. Keep that in your mind, because when we look at Isaiah, this next reading, you're going to see some of the same imagery. So the Lord is speaking in this reading. He says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. So think of that with the Palm Sunday, where we say, okay, you know, the Lord's coming not to be an earthly king, or we think he's coming to be an earthly king, and we say, no, he's not doing that. His ways are higher, right? He's not doing that. But this prophecy here is about the second coming. So when he says that his ways are higher than our ways, what's he really getting at there? He's telling us that, well, there's something more than even we're seeing, perhaps. As the rain comes down, right? We have rain in both the Isaiah and the David prophecy. And the snow from heaven, and they do not return there, but water the earth and make it bring forth and bud. Think about like the tender grass in the other one, right? So it's got to give seed to the sower and bread to the eater. So shall my word that goes forth from my mouth. It shall not return to me void, but it shall accomplish what I please, and it shall prosper in the thing which I sent it. So he's saying, I'm putting stuff out there, there's rain coming down, and it's going to do what I want it to do, right? He's like, I'm not just sending the rain down to make the world wet, right? It's going to do something. It's going to fertilize that seed. The grass is going to come. It's going to accomplish what I sent it to do. It's going to do something. It's going to prosper things. It's going to grow that grass, and that's going to come forth, and it's going to bud. Seed to the sower, bread to the eater. It's going to do something. It's not going to do nothing, right? There's purpose. There's usefulness, right? So then it says, you shall go out with joy and let out with peace. The mountains and the hill shall break forth into singing before you, and the trees of the field shall clap their hands. That should sound familiar, right? So once again, it's going to be happiness. It's going to be great. There's going to be some time for all this to happen, because we have to have the rain. And well, of course, it starts with darkness. So you have darkness, and then you have rain, and then once you've had the rain for a while, the sun's going to break through the clouds, and then you're going to see the sun. And once the sun's had its time to shine on some things, you're going to start to see that the grass starts to grow up, and again, seed for the sower, bread for the eater. So I guess what I'm trying to pull out here is that it's going to take time for all this to happen. You're going to get these 4 parts, right? Darkness, rain, sun, tender grass. So what are these things? And what are these things that are going to happen in order for the second coming to take place, and that the trees of the field shall clap their hands and break forth with joy and singing and all that? Because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the mountains and the hills to break out with singing and gladness. So, well, what's the sign of the times? Why aren't we feeling like we're there yet? Why don't we feel like that's happening? So, what are the 4 steps here? Well, darkness. What is darkness? It's not too difficult to figure this one out, right? Darkness is essentially bad teachings. Bad teachings, bad beliefs, bad thoughts about ourselves, bad thoughts about others. It's the way of the wicked is darkness, right? So we may not be able to help the fact that there's darkness around, but we have to do our best to do something about it, right? But nevertheless, stage 1, darkness. The rain coming after darkness. Now rain, with the exception of that whole Noah's Ark story, rain is a good thing, right? Rain, we want rain. In Bible stories, when there's famine, that's a sign that bad things are happening. So you'll want rain. Think about the Elijah story. Elijah comes and tells King Ahab, no rain until I say so, and famine in the land, and things are going bad. I think it's like 3 years there was no rain. So rain is about reception. You get rain if you're willing to receive what the Lord is offering you. If you're willing to receive the word, then you've got rain. Clouds that we have it's a literal sense of Scripture. Think about it in terms of, right, the sun's way out there, clouds are in between, and the literal sense gives a covering over the direct truth. You don't always get the purest truth from the sun. Sometimes you get light that comes through the clouds. So clouds are about the stories that are used to wrap up the actual teaching. So we need to have a state of reception. We have to become thirsty for the Lord. And even when you have that and you got those clouds that are coming around to give you the rain, we don't have sun yet, right? No sun. At least sun that we're not experiencing, right? It's still there. So why aren't we seeing the sun? Well, maybe because we're not receptive enough. We don't have enough rain. We have to be spiritually thirsty. And as a society, that's what we have to get to. We have to be a point where we actually want the rain. And I think a lot of people right now aren't quite there yet. People are pretty content going to the beach, doing their thing. They got life, they got money, they got food on the table. So maybe we're not particularly spiritually thirsty right now. And so we're not ready to change. We're content to do things the way that we are doing. So we have to get to that point. But once we get to that point where the rain starts falling, that's the place where we're starting to say, hey, well, maybe I should do things differently. Maybe I should try something else. So I do think something good is happening in this place when you start to, want rain and you want to see things differently. And where I have optimism is that I do think there are people who are starting to see the truth. They are starting to see the sun. People are starting to realize that, well, how can God have these bad qualities? How could God cast people to hell just because they never joined the Christian church, right? That doesn't make any sense. How could God, send infants to hell because they've never been baptized, right? People are starting to question some of this orthodox Christian views that have been around for 1,000 or 2,000 years. How could God do all these things? This doesn't make sense, right? So people are starting to ask some good questions. They're starting to change the way they see some things. And this is good. People are starting to think that, well, if God is all-powerful and almighty, he must be good to all people. And they're starting to see him as loving. And Swedenborg in the writings talks about this is a really big deal. This is a fundamental change that's happening, and it happens across religions. And you get this, because if you get this idea of God right, well, everything else falls into place. And we've talked about this recently. If you get that right, all the other follow-on stuff comes true. So I have some hope. I have some optimism in that I see people are asking these questions. They're starting to get the idea of God right in their heads. The last piece of this series of darkness and rain and sun is the grass sprouting up. The grass is about our reformation of our lower self. So it's changing the way we operate in the world. It's the last thing that happens. You know, you've got to be receptive. You've got to understand God better. You've got to let that sun come down. And then through that, we start to actually make some changes. And it takes time for all this to happen. And it takes time for us to go to a place where we're thinking, all right, you know, I've had enough of that insanity. You know, we get tired of it. We say, okay, I've had enough. I'm ready to do something else. And I'm ready to change the way I act in this world. Unfortunately, this doesn't all go in a straight line, does it? You know, it's oh yeah, there's darkness and there's rain, and oh, there's some more darkness and there's some rain. And, oh, sun, oh, back some darkness. You know, it doesn't go as cleanly as we'd like, right? Because there are other areas where we have more darkness and other areas where we have more light, and you know, so it's not a clean process. But I do think there are good things that are happening in the minds of people trying to do the right things. Sometimes I think they come to the wrong conclusions in their efforts to do the right things. But I think people are trying. So when you keep in mind these ideas of these prophecies of the second coming, some of the stuff that we see in the world, though, does make some more sense. Because we see some people in darkness. We see some people who are just wandering around blind. We see others who are thirsty or searching for something more. And if we start walking down the street and we start grumbling about our friend to the news and saying, "Oh, you can't believe these stupid people, you know, I can't believe this is happening, blah, blah, blah." It's really easy to do that. It's really easy to do that. But can you imagine doing that and the Lord walking up to you now? What would he say? Would he say, "Ah, you fools, don't you know? There's got to be the darkness and the rain and the sun, and then we get the tender grass. Come on, man, pay attention. Don't you see the signs?" He's asking us, saying, like, you know, you read the word, you know what it says in there. Why are you so upset? Why are you so upset? There's going to be these things. It's going to come around. The stuff's going to be there. It's going to be productive. The rain's going to bring it about. And then once it does, once the grass sprouts, well, we can start sharing around, right? Once the bud start to grow the wheat, we can share that bread with other people. We can share that goodness. I think so often when we complain, it's like we think we're informing the Lord of stuff he wasn't aware of, right? You know, "Oh, gee, Lord, I can't believe these people. Can you believe this happened in this you know, this law in this country or this whatever? Don't you know?" And it's like we expect the Lord to say, "Oh, gee, thanks, I didn't know that. Oh, got me on that one. That one slipped through the cracks. Sorry about that." Yeah, no, right? We didn't catch the Lord by surprise. We didn't, you know, catch him off guard. We're not informing him of things he doesn't know. He's got it all figured out. So when we complain to him, the reality is we're not actually giving him information, right? We're not really informing him. So think about that the next time you want to complain. Go, well, all right, I'm not telling him anything he doesn't know. And you know what? He's probably not going to say, "Boy, gee, thanks for letting, you know, grabbing an arm around you and say, thanks for that. Appreciate that." He's not going to commiserate with you. He might tell you the same thing he told the disciples. "You fool! Aren't you paying attention? Don't you know the signs of the times? Wake up. These things have to happen." I think if we have that kind of smack in our face kind of talk pictured in our minds, we might be a little more hesitant to complain. Amen.